Good day, people. Shadow Eater, one angry pagan. Now, I'm. This is going to be a little bit of a rehash of some earlier stuff that I've done, but I'm coming into conflict with mindsets that don't allow, it seems, for a lot of evolution in thought. Now, the reason why I think this is a big problem, and the reason why I reference to begin with my earlier videos, is the way I think is a lot of it's born from my study of paleontology and my fascination with origins and how that evolves through time. I'm interested in speculative evolution just as much as why I can still enjoy fiction as long as it's good. I can't. It can be sometimes difficult to explain how that how my initial study of paleontology growing up as a kid, and that like stuck in my head and continued it into my teenage years, and then it became a point of I wasn't just interested in the evolution of animals, dinosaurs and whatnot. I started to get interested in the evolution of the planet itself, as well as I got a little bit older and I started to become a little bit more sociable. I started to think about the evolution of different social sort of things, like especially music. You know, I became very interested in the evolution of music. That's why to this day I'm still interested. I'm still interested in the evolution of music. It's not just that though. I became interested. Like another aspect of that became religion and our country's history, our people's cultural history. Now, when a lot of people talk about our people's cultural history, there's a lot of there's a fair amount of piss taken, especially from the left, because it comes across as very right wing, and I can understand why. But for me, this is purely a fascination with my ancestral heritage. This is why I ended up being pagan, especially heathen pagan. This is a large part of what that is as a very cultural, social feeling towards wanting to venerate your ancestors. And my way of venerating my ancestors is to talk about and bring up, you know, to talk about and bring up where we came from in a very honest and open way, and not just from a very skewed direction. I I heard a lot of people have a go at me. Oh, you paganism, so you believe that Christians were here first? And it's like, well, you can say that, but the Celtic paganism was here before the the Romans came over, and they with their paganism, which then developed in where it switched to Christianity when they switched, and then paganism came back when the Germanic peoples invaded this island, which is where we become English. Again, like this all, you see where this is going. Like my mindset is towards evolutionary thinking. I'm always thinking about how things evolve. And in the last 5 to 6 years, I've thought more about politics and society and how that has evolved throughout time. I've not just looked at British history, I've looked at a bit of French history, I've looked at German history, I've looked at European history as a whole, especially the Scandinavian histories as well. With Christianity being so prevalent, obviously I've had to learn about Mediterranean history, and Islam being present in this country, meaning I've had to learn about that Persian area of Asia, as well as the Arabian part, and learning about Africa. My thought has evolved over time, and again, my politics has evolved over time, and I sat for a good few months watching not just YouTube videos, like independence video people doing what they're doing. I sat and watched university lectures on UK politics for months. Ones that had been uploaded to YouTube, yes. So yes, there were still YouTube videos. I get it. Haha, take the piss. But my point is that this was university lectures. And I sat and watched more than 100 videos just to do with British politics through the last 150 years, so I could better understand where we've come from, what's happening, what's happened more recently, and what's happening, around about now. That took me months, but that it comes to seeing that evolution, and a big problem that I keep seeming to find is that there seems to be this. It's almost like a stagnation of thought amongst the left. It's not just the left, I mean, the right and the centre do it too. But being on the left, I want to highlight it from my own side. And I'm seeing a lot of stagnation and a lot of, what's accused of with the right, and I do it too, is there's a lot of romanticism about the past. Now you can say that's hilarious considering how I dress. I mean, that's fair enough. But for me, it's a case of displaying, bringing back something that comes from our early culture. I don't see why that's a problem. We're all dressed the way we are, aren't we? Either way, we are like on the left. We are guilty of doing the same thing. I know plenty of people on the left who romanticized the USSR and China, and still do. When you come from my background, I've not done it. I've not been past secondary school. I've not done any formal study apart from a little bit of carpentry in college. But whenever there's been university stuff, university lectures or proper research, especially on the subject of paleontology, I'm in there. I'm listening to reading. More recently I've been going more into detail with the phylogenies of different animals. Trying to lock more of that into my head, see about how the evolution of thought, even just about that, has taken place, has been interesting. But again, bring it back to politics and the left, there seems to be this, we did it better before, why don't we do it again? Now, I recognise that, but it seems like people think that we can just impose this on the people. That's how that's another form of dictatorship. Like we do, like as flawed again. As I said this before, but as flawed as it is, we do live in a democracy, and the majority of people that we know that vote tend to be in the centre ground. And they just want things to carry on as, they want things to get better, but they don't want things to just boom, everything's different. Boom, everything's different. They aren't. That's not what they want. We on the left, we would like to see a whole bunch of radical changes to the way of society, the way that society works, and I fully get that. But my understanding of how things work in reality is of how evolution works, how changes actually take place. Is these changes what take place over decades or centuries or millennia or even millions of years or billions of years? When it comes to human society, it I'm you know capitalism made its push and dominated the last century and a bit. You know, this century and the century after, depending on what happens concerning, you know, natural disasters and whatnot, our understanding of the universe around us is increasing, and because of that, technology is going to increase. Is going to improve, and the increase in improved technology is going to expand, or is at least likely to. Now, we can learn to adapt to this, or we fight against it with we look we look at the conservatives, and much of their ideology is fighting against progress, against change, and that's what appeals to the centre ground. Is that they don't want things. I mean, whilst they want things to change, they don't want things to change that much. Especially, at least in their lifetimes, as selfish as it sounds, I know, but they don't. Honest to the gods, they don't. And there's fuck all you can do to convince most people. Now, a lot of people do want change, yes. Like, this is like, I'm not denying that. But I think people misunderstand, like, what happens in reality, just how much change people are willing to accept to their lives, for because they want a balance between stability and progress. Progress necessarily means change, but they want some kind of limiter on that, so they're able to catch up with that change. Does that make sense? If you guys get it, let me know. But again, evolutionary thought, and I feel like people misunderstand this. Like, there's a lot of our Labour have betrayed where they've come from. No, from what I can gather, that still much of their funding comes from unions, and Mick Lynch is still saying, one, to work to vote for the Labour Party, and two, he's saying that the new workers' bill, he likes it. So I don't see they're not what they're not as left as I'd want. But again, like, as I've gone on about for the last 5-10 minutes, I recognise that the centre ground is essentially the controlling party, the controlling part of the population. Like, that's how our democracy currently works. The point of, to me anyway, of the reason why socialism, and when it comes to politics, I should explain why paganism appealed to me, at least from one aspect. I can explain to you why socialism appealed to me, and that's because it doesn't deny evolutionary, the evolution of human beings. It's supposed to allow for that. But if it's supposed to allow for that, socialists need to understand that really need to understand that we're not going to get a lot of what we want now. You need to build a strong foundation to build on first. We haven't got socialist society yet, so we need to build the foundations for that. And that means, yes, concessions quite often, but if we can get a solid base to build on, whereas capitalism is a lot of it's built on on shaky ground, unsteady ground. We with the upcoming disasters, I wonder which is going to survive those, societally speaking. Because otherwise it's authoritarianism outright. And I can see that coming too. Now, I'm not, this isn't me trying to be doomers here. I'm not trying, nor am I trying to be Nostradamus, but I'm looking at historical precedent here. Our civilization is you could say it is like at the beginning of its global catastrophe. It's natural global catastrophe is we're at the beginning of it now with the global warming. Now you could say that it's been going on for decades, but when I look at throughout the history of life on Earth, like I look in millions of years. So a couple of decades, like 5 decades, half a century, like that's just right. That's still right at the beginning. That's my perspective, if you know what I mean. I'm coming from a perspective of thinking about millions, if not billions of years, not just hundreds or thousands. So when I think about the current situation, I automatically go to a bigger picture than the individual level that most people are at. And I see that whilst socialist policies are what we need, the reality of the situation means that we can't just force that on a population that is likely to push back if we push too hard. Let me know what you guys think. I know I've done similar videos about this, but I feel like despair, fatalism, disenfranchisement, and a big dose of Tories having ruled over us for over a decade has made people too cynical. There are many of us on the left who would rather, we want to see, socialist policies, but we recognise we're not like that. It's not big. People think I have accused me of being in the centre ground. I'm not actually in the centre ground. I just recognise that the reality of the situation, and that's that in our democracy, as it is right now, the centre ground is what has the democratic power, and that's what's going to destroy the Tories at the next election. Most people aren't going to just they're not. Most people when they're voting aren't ideologically married to either parties, to any of the parties really. Like different policies from different parties are appealing to people, and will vote on what they're feeling. This next election, Labour will win it. and I don't like to be absolutists, but they are, well, okay, they are like, they're most likely to win it at the moment. I don't see Labour dropping the ball majorly. I don't think people are going to vote because of Gaza. Labour are a lot more likely to institute policies that, whilst not exactly are what we want, they are more, they are along that line. The problem that people can't get past is that must, in turn, come with compromise. And I wish people would look at history without rose tinted glasses. Like, actually look at study history properly. Because, I mean, and I'm not talking just from what people have written. You know, we know about a lot of events because of physical evidence, not just people writing shit down and making their own shit up about different events. Granted, a lot of what we know comes from written evidence, but if that can be married to physical evidence, then I don't see the issue there. Granted, it's not like to be 100% correct, but this is what, as historians, we kind of expect. If you're a proper historian, you try to learn as much as you can, given that you're never unlikely to know all of the evidence. So, where people are having a go at Labour for not doing what they want because it's not, it doesn't, they got compromises with the banks and stuff. It's the cost with the game as it is right now. It just is like you can say that, but that's Tory behaviour. But honestly, it is just realistic. This is the game we have to play right now with first past the post system. With Labour and the amount of actual leftists within the Labour Party, we can push for more. With the Tories, we can't push for shit. And quite simply, that is the bigger picture. And that's really uncomfortable for a lot of people who are very ideologically driven. What do you say to it, really? Like I said, my perspective comes from my understanding, having grown up thinking about great amounts of time than just minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years. Like I'm thinking about how our people are going to develop in the next hundreds, in the next decades or hundreds of years already, because I already think from a bigger perspective than just the individual level of what just I would expect to see. Already thinking at a bigger level, you have to take in to effect that humans are fickle people. They're a fickle species, and we never develop in a straight. Or at least we rarely develop in a straight line. Evolution very rarely develops in a straight line, and more so, if you were to study it like I have, you would see that in the evolutionary tree there are so many dead ends. But that's how evolution works. Evolution works by going like, does this work yet? Well, let's carry on with it. If it works, then it works. If it doesn't, then it changes. And whilst I get the whole, a lot of the responses like, I understand this. I really think people don't actually understand this and struggle to apply that mindset to politics. Because again, much of what I get chucked at me is, but nothing ever changes. It's always the same. And whilst I can see the temptation to doubt, to fall into that way of thinking, knowing what I know means that I can't just, think like that. This isn't necessarily a doom spiral we're in. And knowing history like I do, I know things are going to change. But it takes a great amount of time for people, for human societies to change than people seem to think it will. The left needs to calm, I say the left needs to calm down. The left needs to be more, have a better perspective on things. We have a very good perspective on things, but I think it needs to have a better perspective than it already does. I think that we should always conceive to improve our conceptions and preconceptions. Much of the last 5 years has been spent me delving myself into the left, and I gotta tell you, at the last election, Jeremy Corbyn was a political hero for me. I don't see why people still hold on to it, but that's because, the more I learned, the more I realised that, you can't just be all one in or on the other. He's not going to be leader of the Labour Party again, I don't think. At least not right now. And Keir Starmer is going to be leading the Labour Party into government. The point of what we need to do is to get ready to challenge where it needs to be challenged and support to develop from ground level where Labour make good progress. I think as socialists at the ground level, what we should be doing is, if Labour have a good idea, we should be looking to be more in contact with our local governments, local councils and stuff. Giving a lot of feedback into the government, into the more central government. That doesn't necessarily mean showing resistance. I mean, yes, it does. Or at least it can. But I think people miss the balance that's needed here. This is why I think actually this is why people call me a centrist, because I have an obsession with balance. But that, whilst I have an obsession with balance, that doesn't mean that I'm someone who sees myself dead in the centre, because I'm not. I'm on the left. The values I hold mean that I want socialist policies. What it doesn't mean is that I want to force what I believe onto everyone else. This is something I think, from a social standing, comes from a monotheistic religion. Now, whilst a lot of people on the left are atheists, the societies that most of us in the West have grown up with have been under a monotheistic society. Whilst I didn't have quite as strict an upbringing when it comes to that kind of thing. It took a lot of unlearning different mindsets for me to think in different ways. And one of those ways is not thinking, just getting to your own opinion and thinking your way is the only way that things can be done. People can think I'm arrogant. People can think I'm arrogant all they want, but like, I know I don't know enough, and I don't think people on the left realise this. I think when many on the left look into something, they look most of the way into something, and because of their political bias, they get a preconceived notion about things, and then their opinion forms everything from then on about what they think about the facts, rather than taking the facts as the important part, which actually completely misunderstands dialectic materialism, I should say. Again, I haven't done formal study, but most of what I've spent my life doing is sat and learning. And what I've learned is that we need to, when thinking about especially politics and how things are going to affect a population of tens of millions, you need to actually think about those tens of millions and not what you want for those tens of millions, about what they want. It's not like, and what they need. It's not just having a preconceived idea about what we think they need and what we think they want. It's actually ascertaining what they want, like what they think they want. Now, you could say that sort of thinking leads to Brexit, like it did. No, it doesn't, because I don't recognise anyone who advocated for Brexit who thinks the way I do. And I would encourage people to go out there and find a Brexiteer who thinks exactly the way I do. I would challenge you £100 to do so, and I'm going to regret that. Although, no, I'm not, because you can't. I don't agree with the right wing. I just know how the population as a whole are going to react to any. We've seen that, you know, how the population, in a large part, just distrust big promises. In large part, they just want things to work. There's been so much hardship that people just want things to work. And those of us who want things to get better need to understand that we need to just make things work first, to have a steady ground to build upon, to make things better. I think people need to really have a better understanding of the perspective about the time scale of these changes. So many people calling out for this, calling out for that, not understanding. In the same way people didn't understand shit about Brexit, not understanding the time scale of how these things are going to take effect. One of the reasons why people voted for the Tories in 2019 is because a big part of the population was sick and tired of just how long it was dragging out. And people misunderstood or believed the charlatans when they were saying, oh, we can just do this, we can just do that. It put people into the mindset of thinking that things can just happen like this, just happen like this, just happen like this. this is a misconception, in my opinion, and I'll agree it is my opinion, but I think my opinion is valid here. We need to lower our expectations of what we think we can get done in just in a relatively short amount of time, given the fickle nature, especially of the UK voting public. The world has become a little bit more volatile than it was, and people are panicking. So on one level I get it, but I really implore everyone to take a step back and look at things realistically, because I really want those changes too. But we need to think about how we can actually get them, instead of thinking of instead of thinking of what we want and then just continuing to think of what we want. We need to think of how we actually get this in a realistic sense, and historical precedent proves, to me at least, that much of that comes with compromise, and it happens over decades, not if not hundreds of years. We need to set up. We like what we do should be setting up for the future, not just improving life now. We need to recognise that as cold as what I'm about to say might sound, it is a reality. Much of what we try to achieve now isn't likely to directly affect the majority of the population now. It's it's for our future. Evolutionary thinking, and I get that. I get why people. I think we need to have this thing sorted now, but this is why people need to see the value. Need to see the value of compromise. No, I'm not saying we should compromise with the right, but the left needs to relearn to compromise with the centre, because that's why the centre ground Liberal Democrats joined with the Tories and not the Labour Party in 2010. So I think we guys need to be more sensible when it comes to this stuff. I've got rambled now for over 35 minutes, but I really hope people understand at this point that we are evolving, and evolution is difficult. Fighting for what is right it isn't usually easy. It can be on occasion, but it isn't usually. And just because something is difficult does not mean that we should give up the fight. The reason why I advocate voting Labour is because they are the best vehicle to get any change at all. The people who want radical change right now, I think they misunderstand how things work, and refuse to understand how things actually work. Now, this isn't me resigning myself to, neoliberalism. That's not what's happening here. I see how our society works, and trying to explain that instead of fighting against the current here and making that our explicit goal to fight against the current, we can take the current and divert the current into a different path. I don't know if that's just a foreign way of thinking to people, but it's the way I think. Let me know if you lot agree with me on this. Again, as I said before on this channel, like much of this channel is documented evidence of my evolutionary thinking throughout time about all sorts of different things to do with our society. I feel like much of the observations I'm making are correct, and that if they are incorrect, I want people to challenge me. Problem is holding people's attention. And I get that I can ramble, but what can I do about it? I'm not gonna script my videos. I'm just not going to do that. So yeah, I'm sorry if this sounds a bit like a lecture, but we need to change. We need to evolve. We on the left also need to evolve the way we think. We need to, look at where things worked, look at where things don't work, and move forwards. Try to think of different ideas of how to move forwards. This is why compromise is important. And that doesn't make me a centrist. That makes me a pragmatist. Give me your comments and reactions in the comment section below. Please like and share. This has been Shadow Eater, One Angry Pagan. Good way to see you. Good fate, everyone. And blessed to say. Blessed be.